Welcome to the Leaderish Podcast with your hosts, Regina and Doris. Hey, Doris. How's it going?
Hey, Regina. It is wonderfully well. How about you?
Doing great. I've been doing lots of good work that I'm very energized about and having lots of opportunities to practice a little bit of emotional intelligence, which is our topic of conversation today. So I'm excited to dive in and talk a little bit more about emotional intelligence. How about you?
Absolutely. It is a great topic. I was telling one of our fans that that's what we're going to record today, and she couldn't wait. She also agreed that it was a great topic, and I think it's something that we could all use a little bit more of. So I'm excited to discuss what it is and how we can improve our own emotional intelligence.
Awesome. Well, let's start there then. Let's start with what is emotional intelligence. So I think in order to talk about what emotional intelligence is, we probably need to talk about IQ first, because a lot of times we measure IQ, we talk about IQ, right? You get IQ tests, and that's really more around your logic, your reasoning, and your memory. But in order to be a intelligent person, you not only need that logic, reasoning, and memory, but you also need interpersonal skills. So emotional intelligence is the ability to understand, use, and manage your own emotions for yourself and for others. And you do this so that you can overcome challenges and diffuse conflict.
Absolutely. Be a better listener, be a better observer. Notice what's happening in the emotions around you. Like you said, it starts with you and recognizing your own emotions, but then also relating to other people and their emotions.
Right.
So being able to be truly empathetic to what's happening in their facial expressions, in their body language, in their tone, and sometimes the use of words. Yeah. That all comes to play in recognizing emotions in others and then responding in a way that makes the conversation and the relationship better.
Okay, so I have a little story to tell on this, but more specifically, it's more tattling on myself. So as we were doing like some more research for this podcast, I did an emotional intelligence test. Not really an emotional intelligence test. I've done that, and we'll talk about those assessments. This was more about reading facial expressions.
I did that test too.
Oh, did you? Okay, good. So I will tattle on myself. There are 20 different facial expressions, and it's like people going, and right? It's all of these facial expressions. I only got 12 out of 20 right. I got a little bit more than 50%. I was devastated because I really thought that I could read facial expressions reasonably well, but what I learned is that I misread facial expressions.
Oh my goodness. I think I scored 17 out of 20.
Of course you did. I'm not surprised. I am not surprised, but I thought that I was going to nail this test. I thought that I was going to be like, holy cow, I can do this. I'm going to get all of these right. I can read facial expressions. I got 12 out of 20. We'll post a link for you in the comments. Take the test and see if you're a Regina or you're a Doris. Doris obviously is great at reading facial expressions. Regina is not great at reading facial expressions, even though I thought that I did, which kind of takes us into the 4 components of EQ, I think, because when we look at Daniel Goleman's research, he's the one that wrote the emotional intelligence book. It's called Emotional Intelligence. It's not hard to find. He lays out 4 components of EQ. The first one is self-awareness. Obviously, in this situation, my self-awareness was a little low. I thought, I'm like giggling. I thought that I could read other people's emotions on their face. I thought that I could read those. I couldn't, obviously. I got like a little bit more than a 50%. I think a 60% is what I got. That's failing. And so recognizing the emotions in others and recognizing emotions in yourself. So really the self-awareness is more about recognizing the emotions and their impact on others. I thought that I could do something, but really I couldn't. I would say that's pretty low. The second component is around self-regulation. Now, this one I think I'm pretty good at. I think that I manage my impulses. I stay calm under pressure for the most part. There are times, of course, where it just gets a little too much and a little too overwhelming. But as far as self-regulation goes, I'm pretty good at it. In fact, my oldest son, he's 11 years old. Yesterday, we've got all of these things happening with our house. And so I was kind of going through like all the different people that are coming to fix different things and do different things in our house. It's like falling apart. It's only 11 years old. And he's like, Mom, you're managing this so well. You've stayed so calm through all of this stuff. And I was like, yes, that's a win. That's a win for self-regulation.
That is awesome. And it's awesome that your son recognized that you were so calm under pressure. And a lot of times that's a learned behavior. I'll tattle on myself. One of the areas that I struggle with is traffic. And I can get really, really annoyed when traffic slows down for no reason. And I think it started in California when I had to deal with the California traffic when I was living there. And one of my favorite skits on SNL is the Californians, where they always talk about the traffic. And they talk about, well, did you take the 101 and the 405? And they're a little fun. And you have to laugh about it because we all recognize that traffic is just unbelievably crazy out there. And I'll tell a little quick story. I remember the first year that I was out there and my dad visited, and we went to the Getty Museum. And we traveled down there in the morning on the day before Thanksgiving. Took us maybe 40 minutes to get there. And I had no idea that traffic comes to a standstill on the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. And we didn't leave the museum until, I want to say, 4 o'clock.
Oh, no.
And it took us 3 hours to get back home. And I still remember the emotions that I felt. And I had to be completely quiet because I had another human in the car and I couldn't just go insane, which is what was happening in my head. And even today, when traffic gets a little crazy for me, I can find myself getting very upset. But as I work on my own emotional intelligence, I can sometimes step back and say, well, at least I'm not in the accident that's up ahead that's probably causing this. Or at least I gave myself enough time to get to where I need to. So I might be only 5 minutes late as opposed to 30 minutes late. And so if I can step back and control those emotions, I can find myself calming down and using that ability in other situations where I might also get tensed up. And that self-regulation, it's learned behavior. Like you said, the IQ, not so much. EQ is learned and practiced, and we're going to talk about that, but it's something that you can improve upon yourself as you move forward.
Yeah, I love that example because I think that resonates with everyone listening at this moment. We've all gotten frustrated with traffic and screamed or yelled. Like I had this guy yesterday, same thing, like I'm behind him and I need to be somewhere. And he is going 45 miles an hour on I-65. Everybody else is going 60. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding. And so I pass him and he's doing this. He's on his phone. He's looking at his phone. He's not even looking. Of course, he's going 45 miles an hour because he's on his phone. And I remember going, oh, you're on your phone. And then I thought, like, just let him do what he needs to do. I can go around him. It's fine. And so I had that moment of frustration and then I was able to get over it really quick. So I think that's part of that self-regulation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Traffic, what a good example. Ugh. The next one in our 4 components of EQ is social awareness. Some call it relationship management. It kind of depends on what model you look at, but that's really more about building healthy relationships, managing your social network. Empathy falls in there. So being able to not just sympathize with someone, but empathize and understand their emotional needs in the moment is where that social awareness and relationship management goes. I have an interesting story here. I'll tattle on myself more. You and I, we do lots of networking meetings. We meet lots of people that we don't know. We do this like regularly. We're just out there meeting people. And one of the things that I did at a networking event is I walked up to a woman who I'd never met before, and she had a coat on that was a coat that I had been kind of eyeballing. And I walked up to her and I was like, I didn't introduce myself or anything. I literally walked up to her and said, "Hey, is that a J. Crew coat?" She's like, "Yeah, from a couple seasons ago." I was like, "Oh, I've been eyeballing one. And would you mind if I tried on your coat?"
No.
Yeah. So, I am self-aware enough to know that social awareness may not always be my strong point. However, I am happy to report that her and I are very good friends now because of this. We talk at least 3 times a week, if not more. And we always have these conversations about what awkward thing did you say at the networking meeting this week or today? So I am usually that awkward person that may not always read the cues in the room, but I am awesome at building relationships. So my little tattle story.
And that's what's really important is building those relationships. I was listening to another podcast just yesterday on small talk. And the person that runs the podcast was interviewing someone that was incredibly shy as a child. And she has learned how to overcome that and now teaches courses on small talk and introducing yourself. So this is for that traditionally shy person that struggles with maybe reading the cues in the room. But she would give assignments to people. She called it a scavenger hunt. Okay, someone that has a hat or someone that has maybe a purple coat or someone that's drinking coffee. Just walk up to them and have a conversation with them. And it's amazing how you can build relationships just by showing you care, just by starting that conversation. And it doesn't matter if you're in the grocery store or sitting on a bus or a plane. I know sometimes we put our headphones on the plane. We don't want to talk to anybody. But sometimes we do need to do that. You never know when maybe the person you're going to marry is sitting next to you on the plane. Start that conversation. Don't be afraid to have that conversation. If it starts getting a little weird and awkward, maybe at that point in time, pull out your book and start reading.
Right. Oh, I used to be the talker on the plane. I would strike up a conversation with whoever was sitting next to me. And then at some point, because I traveled every week, like I was on usually 4 planes a week. And at some point decided that I was going to stop doing that. And I did not strike up quite as many conversations with people, but I could start a conversation. It usually was just a little awkward to get going, kind of like, "Can I try on your coat, stranger?" Oh, all right. So the fourth component is social skills, which leads very well into where our conversation was going. This is more around, though, how to influence, manage conflict, teamwork, the ability to inspire others. All of these attributes make it possible to build and maintain those healthy relationships in your life. So you need those social skills in order to manage relationships, right?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I'm sure we've all had bosses that are on opposite ends of the spectrum where I can think of my favorite boss that was so good at every one of these, whether it was conflict or building me up or correcting me and giving me feedback, the way that he provided feedback, versus another boss where I just won't even talk about her because it stresses me out just thinking about how she treated me and how I couldn't wait to get away from her. She was a terrible boss and she had absolutely no social skills, and she was known for having no social skills.
Yeah, that's interesting. And thank you for that really great segue, because EQ impacts leadership more than IQ every day of the week. In fact, most studies show that leaders with high EQ outperform their peers by about 20% on average. And that study comes from Korn Ferry, so it's a very reputable study. And what happens with leaders who have high EQ is they usually handle pressure much better. They are more empathetic and much less reactive in situations, and they're really great listeners and strong communicators, which makes all the difference. And that's what we're looking for in leaders. And those are some of the skills that you can build in order to develop your EQ.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that I was thinking about is like, when we look at leaders who can handle pressure really well, they're empathetic, they're less reactive, they're great communicators, awesome listeners. What does that do? Like, what is the impact to their teams? Now, I've been, like you, on teams with leaders who had high EQ and leaders who had very low EQ, and we won't go into that today. But I will tell you that there is a huge difference between those teams. Those teams have a higher level of trust when you have a leader with strong EQ amongst the team and with the leader. Those teams also are much more effective in their decision making. They're able to make decisions quickly. They're able to move on. They're able to be less reactive because of their leader.
I totally agree with that. I think that the leader, you follow the leader.
Right.
When the leader behaves badly, you still will follow that leader. When the leader behaves well and has that high EQ, your team can learn from that leader. That leader represents what a good leader should look like.
Yeah.
Now, if you have a bad leader, two things are going to happen. Either the team is all going to fall apart and they're going to follow that leader again in bad behavior, or the team is going to be so dysfunctional that everyone's going to try to leave as quickly as they can.
That's right, because low EQ teams have low retention. High EQ teams have high retention and higher engagement. You're absolutely right. You know, going back to what you said about like we follow the leader, I had a leader who used to say, "Fish stinks from the head." And I love that phrase because what that means is that the head of the team, the leader of the team, sets the tone for the entire team. So if you are handling pressure, being empathetic, being less reactive, being a great listener, being a good communicator, your team is going to follow the lead. If you're doing the opposite, well, then the opposite's going to happen, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and you can feel it in the room. If the leader shows up, if you've got a meeting, a team meeting, and the leader shows up and is really upset, and you can read the tone in his or her body, and I'll say her just because it reminds me of the bad leader that I had. And she could come into a room and just the energy that she is giving off is so negative and toxic that the meeting doesn't go in the right direction. The team members all want to get out of there as quickly as they can. You can feel the negative energy in the room versus that opposite when you have that positive energy. And the thing is, and we're going to get to the how to develop it, sometimes you have to fake it. Maybe things aren't going exactly the way that you want to as a leader. Maybe the CEO has just said, "Man, your department you need some corrections." And rather than going into the room and yelling at everybody to try to get it corrected, you need to lead and not stink at the top as a head and have positive energy and work with the team to try to turn it around in a positive way rather than looking at it from a negative and trying to almost intimidate people into submission. That's just never going to work.
Right. Well, you're absolutely right. And for you listening right now, if you want to pause the episode, but I want you to think for a moment about a leader who inspired you. What made them stand out? How did they make you feel is one of the things that I want you to think about. I don't want you to think about like how smart they were or how good at their job they were, but how did they make you feel? And that is what you want to try to replicate with your teams as you're leading, whether it's formal leadership or informal leadership, how do you make people feel is where the difference is in a high-performing leader and a low-performing leader. So let's get into a little bit around how we develop emotional intelligence. Doris, what are some things that you have practiced?
Definitely mindfulness is one thing that I have practiced. And mindfulness means stepping back and just pausing. So if you feel, let's say your blood pressure increasing, your heart rate increases, your palms getting sweaty because it's a stressful situation, rather than allowing yourself to feed into all those emotions, those negative emotions, take a step back, literally pause, literally start breathing. And the breathing box method, where you breathe in for 4, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, and hold that for 4. It's amazing how quickly that can calm you down. So I think that's one method. I also started reading a book, The Let Them Theory. And I think it's one of the most popular. It's on the New York Times bestseller list.
We love Mel.
Yes, we love Mel. But what she talks about is the let them theory is when negative things are happening around you, rather than getting caught up again in that negativity, you let it happen. You let that negative energy and don't let it impact you. Now, there are two parts of it. It's let them and then let me. So you've got to read the book to get to the let me part. But the let them is you don't allow all these negative things that are happening around you to impact you. So when someone maybe says something nasty, or you think someone is judging you, whether they say it out loud or not, you think someone is judging you, you let them judge you. And you don't allow that to impact you or turn your reactions into negative reactions or fester. You don't allow that judgment to fester. And I know I had an example, I think I talked about it a few episodes ago, where someone was bullying me on social media. And I did allow that to fester. And today, after reading, I'm about halfway through the book, using that methodology and just say, well, let him be the person that he is on social media. I'm not going to allow that to impact me anymore.
It kind of goes back to like the driver that was on his phone driving 45 miles an hour, right?
Just let him.
Yeah, just let him. Like, let him do his thing. Hopefully he's not going to harm anybody, but let him do his thing. It's not my thing. You can't
control it. You can't control him. You can get upset about it, but it doesn't change the fact that he's on his phone. You can't get the phone out of his hand.
Right.
There's nothing you can do about it.
And I talk about this quite often with my clients as well. And I remind them that we can't control anyone outside of us. So correct. We can't change them. We can't control them. What we can do is work on ourselves. What we can do is change how we react in the situation. What we can do is pause and breathe and reflect. What we can do is set boundaries. What we can't do is allow them to control our emotions, because then they're winning. Absolutely. What we can't do is we can't change them. We can only work on us.
Mm-hmm. So true. So true. I think that naming your emotions, if you name your emotions, it's almost like that breathing exercise where you say, oh yes, I am angry. And I know that sounds silly, but if you can pause enough to say, wow, I was really angry about that driver with the phone, that probably just that pause can calm you down enough to move forward and not allow that situation to impact the rest of your day.
We as human beings, Doris, are terrible at naming our emotions. And it's because of how our brains are created, right? We have our amygdala, which is our fight or flight response, and it takes over our entire brain when we are having strong and deep negative emotions, and it prevents us from naming it. So it takes a lot of mindfulness to name your emotion in the moment, especially when it's a negative emotion. Positive emotions actually are very easy to name. We're like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. I'm so joyful. I'm so excited right now. Those are so easy to name, and we do that all the time. But it is so difficult for us as humans, because of the way our brain is created, to say, I am angry, I am frustrated, I am sad in this moment. But naming that emotion is huge. Now, I want to pause here because, and I'm going to grab my phone because I downloaded this app when we were doing some extra research. I just stumbled upon a new, well, I don't know if the app is new, but it's new to me. Yale University created a free app, and it's called How We Feel. And I have mine programmed to send me a notification 4 times every day. And I check in on how I'm feeling. And it's very interesting. You have, I'm looking at my phone right now, you get 4 areas. So you can either be high energy and unpleasant. Those are those real negative emotions. It's in red, by the way. High energy and pleasant. That's those really high, happy emotions. Low energy, unpleasant. That's kind of the feelings, right? And then you've got low energy and pleasant. That's the calm and relaxed sort of feelings. And you choose one of those colors, and then it gives you a whole bunch of words. Oh my gosh, I did not know that there were so many words to explain high energy and pleasant. But Doris, there's got to be 30 of them. I mean, some of them are like proud, optimistic, productive, joyful, happy, alive. Yeah, we get those. Curious, eager, determined, awe, exhilarated, surprised. There are so many words. There are so many emotions just to describe high energy and pleasant. And I have found this so much fun to check in on my emotions. It also asks you, like, what were you doing? Who were you with? Where are you? What's your location? So you can start recording that, and you can start seeing the different habits you have with your emotions. It's absolutely just fantastic. It's the only word that I can come up with. I know it's
good word.
Fantastic to be able to put those words. And what you're doing is you're actually retraining your brain to recognize the emotion that you're feeling in the moment, because we feel millions of emotions all day long, and they change from split second to split second. So being able to record that snapshot and actually think about what you're experiencing in this moment has been transformational for me. I highly recommend everyone download the How We Feel app. It's a Yale app, and you're going to look for a heart that's like multicolored. It's like a rainbow type heart with a black background, because when you type in How We Feel, or like a mood app or something like that, you get lots of different options. A lot of them have paid for options. Yale will accept donations, but they do not charge for their app. They also have these amazing videos that help you build your emotional intelligence. Just highly recommend. I mean, like 5 out of 5 people, if you haven't downloaded, just pause right now, go to find How We Feel app in your app store and download it and get started. You're going to love it.
Oh, I love that. I need to download that too. I haven't done that. Reminds me, have you noticed when you go to the doctor, at least for me, when I go to the doctor now, the little pre-assessment before you go in, they start asking you how you feel. Mm-hmm. So while I think in the past, people just ignored any of the mental challenges that people face. And I think it is a lot more accepted and recognized that we need to be able to name our emotions, where we try to bury it under the carpet for so many years. And now we're talking about it a lot more. And the fact that we're talking about it helps us overcome those negative emotions. Yeah. And I think that's a great way of doing that. Also, journaling. Journal your emotions. Journal every single day. I still need to get better at it. I journal what I'm grateful for every day, but I don't necessarily journal the negative emotions. I remember at one point, before I was married, I would journal a little bit, and I realized everything was about boys and boyfriends that would break up with me. And I thought, I don't want to read that 20 years from now and how sad I was when a boyfriend
over this
broke
breakup
up with
because
me.
you probably wrote more about the sad things that happened to you than you did the happy things.
I did. And when I reread that after I got married, I'm like, I'm getting rid of this. So I didn't keep that.
I love that. That's hilarious. I love the gratitude journal. You've talked about that several times. I don't do that. It could be something, and I say it every time you bring it up, every time, I should do that. Probably not going to. Like, let's just be real honest, because I've said I should do that probably 6 times. I'm not going to do it. But I love it that you do it. I love that.
And it takes a minute, 2 minutes, as you think about what were 3 things that you can be grateful for today. And we also talk about celebrations, which again to me are different. Gratitude is just what you're grateful for. It could be a sunny day. It could be the fact that we got to record the podcast today. The celebration is more, what are some good things that happened to you?
Yeah.
And so keeping 2 different lists, but I like the fact that you're also naming negative emotions. And I try to forget those negative emotions and not write them down. But I think that app could help me if it triggers, okay, at this moment in time, this second of the day, I'm feeling sad for some reason. Writing it down and recognizing that sadness does happen and frustration. And like you said, it changes from one moment to the next moment. You can feel sadness or frustration or anger. Recognize that that's there, but then find ways to maybe circumnavigate and turn those negative emotions into a positive emotion by, again, stepping back, being mindful, naming the emotion, and that will help you improve your emotional intelligence.
I love it. What great tips we have here for developing your emotional intelligence. They were great reminders for me too.
There's a few more on the list. I don't want to forget some of the other ones, like feedback, seeking feedback.
Oh gosh, yes. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up, because we usually do all have blind spots, and sometimes trusted people in your life can help you see those blind spots and make them not blind anymore.
Yeah.
So seeking that feedback, but make sure it's someone you trust when you do ask for feedback, because if you ask for feedback from someone you don't trust, you're going to throw that feedback away.
Yeah, absolutely. And the feedback, and I'm just reading this right from our notes, asking trusted peers how you come across. So it's not just feedback about anything. We're talking about emotional intelligence today. So allowing someone, if you are unsure of how you come across, when you lead a meeting, and maybe you're going to lead this, maybe you lead it a little differently, knowing that you've asked a trusted friend to give you feedback. And maybe that trusted friend will say, normally I notice you come into this room a little negative, a little bit of a hothead. Today, though, you came in a lot calmer. You came in with a higher level of emotional intelligence. And that may be because you asked for my feedback. So I'm going to tell you that here's what I observed between today and other meetings that you've led in the past.
I love that. Yeah, that's great. That's great. Oh, and there's one more. And I've brought this up since we started prepping for this episode. I have brought this up to like 10 different people about reading fiction. And you read a lot of business books, right? I pretty much read fiction. I mean, like, I will tell you, 1 out of 5 books, and I read a lot of books, is a business type book or a nonfiction book. Everything else that I read is fiction. Right now I'm reading The Secret War of Julia Child. I'm in love with this book. Anyway, go ahead, read it. If you want to, you can download it on Libby and get it free from your app or free from your library. So check that out if you want to. But it is really important to read fiction because it improves your empathy and your perspective. It gives you a different perspective. So if you need to build empathy, read fiction. By the way, when I took a formal EQ test, my empathy was so low. It's insane. And that was years ago. I have worked on this, so you can change. And now I score very high in empathy because I have built the skill of empathy. Also, empathy is one of the key drivers of high performing leaders. So that was kind of my reason for building it, is because I wanted to be a high performing leader. So I wanted to build up my empathy.
That's great. And it does not surprise me that fiction can help build empathy, because when you read fiction, there are so many different characters that happen, whether you're reading a murder mystery or a romance or science fiction, there are so many characters, and you usually can find someone in that book to empathize with. And the difference too between a book and a movie is you dive a lot deeper in a book. You really understand the character. You build the character so much more in a book. In a movie, yeah, you might get a little bit of that, but it happens too quickly. Reading a book gives you so much more understanding, and that I absolutely can see how that builds your emotional intelligence and your empathy.
That was a great point about the movies, because it just dawned on me in this moment that when you're watching a movie, they do build that character so quickly that you don't recognize what it is that you are resonating with in that character. In a book, it's built so slowly that you are recognizing every step where you're connecting with a character.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. I had never thought about that in that way. Thank you for that. All right, well, let's kind of wrap this up, Doris. What are a couple takeaways that you would like to share from this episode?
Yeah, I think it's so important that we build it for strategic reasons. I think sometimes you might think about, oh, knowing your emotions, well, that's a soft skill. Well, I don't really need to know that. I'm building a business. I'm building a multi-million-dollar business. I don't need to worry about those soft skills. But as we've talked about how important it is, and being strategic about our emotional intelligence, and really knowing that the emotions of everyone around you is what's going to build that multi-million or billion-dollar business, not being that stinky fish head that's going to try to bully your way into a successful organization. So I think that one is really important. And like we've talked about several times, that it can be developed. You can work on that. I love that you took an assessment years ago. You were low, you worked on it, and now you're high in emotional intelligence. And I think it's so important for our listeners to understand that it can be built, and to start with understanding where you are today, and then work on that so you can be a better leader when it comes to emotional intelligence.
Yeah, agreed.
How about you?
I think for me, just thinking back about how I've developed my emotional intelligence over the years, and then also leveraging one of the gazillions of assessments out there to help you build some self-awareness and figure out where you are, because then you can start working on what you need to work on. Again, we all have blind spots, so seek feedback, take an assessment, and then start building those skills, I think, is where one of my key takeaways is.
Yeah, and I would love to hear from our listeners on their thoughts around emotional intelligence, and where they see themselves, maybe where they were before or where they are today, and how they can build on that. I'd love to hear some stories from our listeners on their own journeys through emotional intelligence.
Yeah. So if you have a story that you'd love to share with us, we'd love to read that story and even feature it on a future episode. You can email us at leaderishpodcast@gmail.com with your thoughts and your story. Of course, you can connect with us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, and on Facebook, all Leaderish Podcast. Or you can send a message to Doris and I directly. We keep our direct email addresses in the show notes, so you can send us an email as well. What a great episode today. That I'm going to drop a little freebie into our show notes as well, which is a self-reflection assessment. So it'll be a few questions. Think of it as like a mini EQ assessment that you can look over when you have a few minutes, take a couple quiet minutes and self-assess. And you can even send this mini self-assessment to someone else and just change it around a little bit and ask them to provide you feedback. So we'll drop those in the show notes. I highly recommend you check out those questions in the show notes so you can give yourself a little mini assessment. If you liked this episode, of course, please give us a 5-star rating and share it with a friend. EQ is something that we can all work on and we can all build, and we would be so grateful if you would share this episode with 1 to 2 of your close friends so that you can all sit down and chat about your EQ journey. With that, I think I'll pick up my coffee and I'll say cheers, Doris.
Cheers.